After gaining independence, Malaya started national industries investment plans to stimulate economic development. At this time, the economy started growing. There were many new opportunities, but Lo Nam Hui had no money to start his business. Therefore, on the 1st of August 1947, he decided to ask his clansman Liu Guangqi for help. They met in Johor Bahru during the anti-Japanese war. They put their money together to buy a big truck and started a timber transport business. At that time, Lo Nam Hui didn't know anything about the prices of trucks and timber. He trusted Liu Guangqi completely. But after a while, he found out he'd been cheated sometimes. Even though not happy about it, only 30 years old, he decided harmony was most precious. He already realized to do business, he had to restrain himself. In 1948, the British colonial government planned to clamp down on anti-Japanese organizations. Lo Nam Hui worried his previous involvement would implicate his family, and he was afraid of being falsely accused or being framed. After long deliberation, he decided to leave the partnership. But when they divided the company's assets, he only got half of a truck. Although Lo Nam Hui was unhappy, he believed the precious experiences he got from this partnership would make him more confident to explore business opportunities.
At that time, we lived in Kota Tinggi. After anti-colonial movements, the British government arrested a lot of people. We, the anti-Japanese army, were on the blacklist. The government wanted to arrest us on the blacklist. The situation was very tense. I thought sooner or later I would get arrested. I immediately went to British consulate citizenship to apply for a passport. The situation here was very tense. I didn't dare go to the countryside. I was afraid to go to the countryside. Also, afraid to go outside. So I decided to stay at home.
Because the political situation was unstable, Lo Nam Hui and his family raised chickens and planted vegetables for a living. He rented out the truck for $300 a month. In 1951, early morning on the 4th day of Chinese New Year, Lo Nam Hui found out his truck that he parked at a gas station in Ulu Tiram before New Year was driven by someone without his permission to transport timber from a timber yard in Dao Paugang area. The person who took the truck without approval was the son of a rubber wholesaler in Ulu Tiram. Because of the tense situation, no one was willing to transport timber from the woodland, so he was forced to go to the mountains himself. Timber transport was Lo Nam Hui's specialty in the first place. He offered himself to take the transport job. The wholesaler only needed to collect the payment. They reached an agreement. Opportunities are only for those who know how to seize them. When Lo Nam Hui offered to take the job, he was uncertain about it. But opportunity just came knocking. He made hundreds of thousands in a few months.
After 1951, 1952, and 1953, my second son, Kwek Kyung, was born in 1951. He was born in tough times. It just so happened that when he was born, the government had stopped arresting people. So I stopped hiding and started my timber business. After that, our life was getting better.
Lo Nam Hui Timber Company was Lo Nam Hui's first company. The number of trucks he owned had increased to 10 and was devoted to timber transport. Because of foreign exchange control in Singapore and Indonesia, Lo Nam Hui made big profits from timber transport, but it didn't last long. British colonial government declared Ulu Tiram Dao Paugang as a restricted area. Lo Nam Hui had to close down his business again.
I came home, lay on the bed. I felt depressed. My wife wanted me to eat something. I said I lost my appetite. I just opened up land. Then the government declared it's a restricted area. I had to close down my business. I was feeling down. She patted me on the back and said, "Don't you worry. I had found someone to tell your fortune. You would have good fortune after 40 years old."
In 1958, Lo Nam Hui, while carrying his fourth son, Kwek Li, took a stroll outside his house in the evening. and met the most important Malay compatriot in his life, Haji Musa. He was the former captain of Johor Military Force. Haji Musa knew Lo Nam Hui worked in the timber industry. He wanted to partner with Lo Nam Hui to open up his forest in Mersing, Johor. With Haji Musa's invitation, Lo Nam Hui went back to open the forest again. This was the first time he partnered with a Malay compatriot, although it's the secondary forest in Endau Mersing, but they could get registered in Forestry Department through that. As long as they got registered, their business had a chance to flourish.
There was a Malaysian, Encik Hakim. He came to our forest. In the forest, you have to wear long sleeves, top and trousers. He started fishing. I gathered earthworms for him. Every time he cast his fishing rod, he caught one big fish. After an hour, he caught dozens of fish.
There was one time the director of Mersing Forestry Office came to inspect Lo Nam Hui and Haji Musa's forest in Jemaluang. They invited him to go fishing at the lake, deep in the forest. When he caught one fish after another, the director was pleased, and he implied that Lo Nam Hui should apply for a better area by the road.
He reproached me. Lo Nam Hui, you're stupid, he said. I asked why. He said, you gave up the forest by the road, came to this remote place. I said it's difficult for us. The road was 3 miles away from here. Then I got an idea. I said I applied for the forest by the road, but couldn't get approval. He said, you haven't applied. I said, I did, but couldn't get approval. He said, if you want, come to Johor Bahru at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Ask to see Officer Mackenzie. He was in charge of forestry in Johor State. He was an Englishman. If you want to come, don't come alone. You have to bring your Malay friend along. He was pleased. He wants me to help him. If I could make money, of course I would help him. He was retired, didn't have much money, and nothing to do. I got up early and went to Jemaluang at 7:30 a.m. I sat there waiting. Mr. Mackenzie rode in a Benz 600. I said I want to apply to him. He asked for what? I said, a timber yard. Where? Here. As marked on the map, block number 6C. Okay. Yes, you can apply for it. He kept saying no problem. He asked me to sit down and waited for 15 minutes. He told the officers to drive cars. They drove 4 to 5 cars to inspect the forest. After they came back, I asked, when can I have the land? He said, right away, now. When could I start working? He said, you can start tomorrow. Even if I won the lottery, I couldn't be happier. We harvested 6 to 7 truckloads of timber. All were transported to Singapore. 6 to 7 truckloads of timber were worth a lot. I paid the money I owed to my neighbors and the others. I became famous then. I paid off all my debts.
The forest he acquired this time had high-quality timber, so Lo Nam Hui and Haji Musa established Max Gong Hui Timber Company. They ran the company successfully for 10 years.
I met the royals through Haji Musa. Then I met the Sultan. Because Haji Musa knew the Sultan, Haji Musa was his bodyguard. So I met the royals. That's it.
Lo Nam Hui's timber business had grown bigger, so he moved his company to number 59B, Jalan Wong Afuk, and reorganized Lo Nam Hui Timber Company, changing the name to Lo Nam Hui Company Sendirian Berhad. In 1965, he partnered with Johor nobleman royalty Tengku Mahmud and started exporting timber. They set up Mados and Lo, working together to build their timber business.
In 1967, Tan Sri Lo built up an interpersonal network through the relationship with Dato Ali's father. They had a good business relationship, so they established Mado's Timber Logs Enterprise, Mado's and Low. These two companies exported lumber and timber to Japan, and business was good logs. At the Causeway and the restaurant New Hong Kong, all the timber floating on the sea was ours.
Because the Sultan was not familiar with timber business, I borrowed $130,000 and set up a company called Mado's and Low. We were equal partners, 50-50. After a few years, he learned enough. He knew how to do business. I decided to leave the partnership. Now he knew how to do it. We had achieved our goals. We should go our separate ways amicably. I went my own way.
After splitting up, Tan Sri reorganized their company again. He called a meeting. Tan Sri was right. Don't be afraid. Where there's a will, there's a way. We didn't have to be afraid. His older son was hesitant and unsure. That's fine. We started all over again.
After partnering with the Royal and building up a successful business, Lo Nam Hui had lost everything again. All that's left were 13 old trucks. Those could only transport timber for other suppliers. Although that didn't make much money, his sawmill in Endau had 2 bandsaws. If it operated 24 hours a day, he could make a nice profit. Lo Nam Hui thought devoting to the downstream of timber industry might be a chance to turn his business around.
At that time, our company's biggest growth was the sawmill in Endau. It grew from 2 bandsaws to 4 bandsaws. We processed more timber and sold it to Singapore.
In the general election on the 10th of May 1969, there was a race riot called 13 May Incident.
In 1969, there was a change of political situation in Malaysia. The 13 May incident. There was a massacre. Everyone in Malaysia was too afraid to do business. People got scared. The way I saw it, this was a good chance. Because I no longer partnered with the Sultan, I thought this was a good chance. No one dared to do business. Then I would do it. I had a friend called Atam, Tam Huanzheng. He was a car insurance agent. I told him no one in Malaysia dared to do business. I would do it. But I needed trucks. I had no money. I had no capital. He asked how many trucks I needed. I needed 10 trucks because I bought a forest already. I must set up a timber transport company. He had a good cooperative relationship with the government. He said, no problem. I needed 10 trucks. After that day, the trucks arrived in a week. I didn't need to pay. He could wait. I paid him the down payment after 3 months. That's how I got started again.
The riot forced all walks of life into hibernation. Many companies and enterprises took a wait-and-see approach. But Lo Nam Hui saw this as the chance of a lifetime, so he flung himself into the sawmill business. With dozens of years' experience opening up land in the upstream of the timber industry, he believed the future of the timber industry was in the downstream. At that time, he already had 6 acres of land in Tampoi, but the construction of a new sawmill was delayed by all kinds of problems. Then there was a dramatic change. The owner of Yap Sui Chun Construction Company proposed to finish the construction for him. Lo Nam Hui only had to pay workers' salaries. He could pay the rest of the construction cost after he made money. Lo Nam Hui also used his own trucks to transport timber from Endau to Tampoi as construction materials. That's the second key. And he bought hardware from Lin Ho Company on credit. That's the third key to his success. Lastly, Lo Nam Hui's Singapore friends offered to take him to French bank Credit Agricole CIB requesting a loan to buy a machine. All these lucky chances and time controlling have a lot to do with Lo Nam Hui's business reputation and loan interest management. He spent a little time and money in a short period of time to finish building the sawmill in Tam Pui. Building the sawmill in Tam Pui was a rare learning opportunity in the business world. Able to use timing relationships and resources to do the impossible was a big inspiration for his career development. In 1971, the sawmill in Tam Pui finally started operation. Aiming at the future growth of the timber industry, Lo Nam Hui established Far East Plywood Berhad in 1970 and started manufacturing fancy plywood, lumber core, and three-layered plywood with different thickness. He built Far East Sawmills Company next to the plywood factory and manufactured all kinds of lumber for exportation. These two sawmills were the fresh start for Lo Nam Hui's career. The government also launched a new economic policy at the same time. After succeeding as Prime Minister of Malaysia, Tun Razak announced to implement a new economic policy for a period of 20 years, provided favorable terms to attract Malaysians to engage in oil palm cultivation. The government's policy was after gaining the rights in large-scale forest land development. All those enterprises had to cultivate oil palms at the same spot and divided 20% of their palm oil plantations distributed to the natives. After completing the development and cultivation, many enterprises bought back the land distributed to the natives. So lots of forest land and plantations were owned by Malaysian Chinese. With the implementation of new economic policy, Lo Nam Hui planned to buy a 5,000-acre plot of forest land within the Southeast Pahang Development Scheme. Although short of capital, his friends in banking business gave him a hand. They used connections to find 8 excavators for him to get a loan from a foreign capital bank, so he could buy Senang Oil Palm Estate, commonly known as Block 3 in Southeast Pahang. This was his first step to success in palm oil industry. Later on, Lo Nam Hui intended to purchase Lian Hup Estate with the same amount of money. But after paying 40,000 as a deposit, he wasn't able to raise enough money to pay the rest. Luckily, the owner was in the middle of a lawsuit then and had no time and energy to deal with Lian Hup Estate.
After we bought that plantation, we started to cultivate oil palms. We harvested timber and sold it. The quality was good, all big timber. We harvested it and sold it. We made a lot of money there.
I went to Kuala Lumpur, met someone who helped me a lot, because in 1967, I was the president of Chinese Chamber of Commerce. At Sagamat, we bought 10,000 acres of land. There were 20,000 acres next to it. My friend Tite got the approval. He gave it to me. He's a nice man. He gave me the land. He gave it to me. For free. Only one condition. I harvested timber, cultivate oil palms. For free. That's give and take. He gave the timber for free. I cultivated oil palms for free. So it's like he had 20,000 acres of land, 30,000 acres.
Gondek Yo and his brother, these three were a group. They got many plots of land. We got the land but weren't able to develop it. He's a businessman, doing business in Kuala Lumpur. Later on, he saw trucks carrying timber from the plantation. He asked us whose the timber was. Lo Nam Hui's? Lo Nam Hui? I never heard of Lo Nam Hui. He's in the timber business. So I gave him the timber. Same as the other deal, he could have all the timber. Problem solved. He harvested the timber. I could develop my plantation, so he told his employees to ask Lo Nam Hui to meet him at Kuala Lumpur. So Lo Nam Hui went to Kuala Lumpur. This was a good chance to get timber. Lo Nam Hui went to Kuala Lumpur. Clean Street. It's behind Zitian Street, now known as Jalan Dundan Chenglok. Went to his office. His son was there. I forgot his name. That's his son. His son was there and said this land is already given to somebody else. It's already been given to someone, but your father asked me to come here. Your father asked me to come here. Let's go see my father. So you are Lo Nam Hui. Lo Nam Hui, I wanted to see you. 18 plots. I got many plots of land. 4 to 5 plots. No one could reclaim the lands. You're harvesting timber there. You could have it. I can give you all the timber. After you finish, just cut all the shrubs for me. You don't need to pay us. It's free. Because he couldn't do that himself, he said, after you cut all those shrubs, you can just burn it. Then you give me back the land. I can start cultivating oil palms.
So, at that time, my timber business was booming. I harvested over 100 trucks of timber. I had 140 trucks.
In 1973, Lo Nam Hui bought East Johor Sawmills Company and exported the lumber and plywood manufactured in his factories to Singapore, China, the Middle East, Hong Kong, UK, and Europe. Through the yields of Lien Hup Estate and Senang Estate, Lo Nam Hui made huge profits. Therefore, he and his many business partners in Singapore established Far East Holding Company. He sold the timber from his old timber yard to Far East Holding Company, and he still owned Lien Hup Estate and Senang Oil Palm Estate. Trucks after trucks of timber exported to Singapore round the clock. His business was growing rapidly. In no time, Lo Nam Hui became a timber tycoon in Johor, Malaysia.
My business was going well. I had 5 sawmills and 1 plywood factory. UMBC Bank had 1 plywood factory in Terengganu. They knew my business was good. UMBC repossessed that factory, asked me to manage it. 2 plywood factories, 6,000 to 7,000 workers in total.
In 1975, he exhibited corporate foresight and decided to build his own palm oil mill inside Lien Hup Estate. From then on, Lo Nam Hui's business had expanded to timber industry, timber processing, timber transport, and palm oil industry.
The timber industry, as time went by, we kept harvesting timber. There's no forest land left, so we gradually moved to other areas.
Most Malaysian Chinese capital was private, but their business partner candidates were strictly controlled by the government. Therefore, Malaysian Chinese businessmen, government, Malay businessmen, society's elite, and technocrats had established cooperative relations.
West Malaysia has limited land and started developing from 1969. In the 1980s and 1990s, peninsular Malaysia had reached saturation point. If the palm oil industry wanted to continue developing, it must move to East Malaysia. When Chief Minister took office in 1982, the Chief Minister of Sarawak wanted to develop the palm oil industry, but he didn't know how to start. He had no idea at all. His classmate, Dr. Paul Young, is a good friend of mine. On one occasion, Dr. Paul Young told him, "You want to develop palm oil industry? Just ask my friend, Tan Sri Dato Lo Nam Hui. He is familiar with it."
The chief minister at that time just took office. He was my classmate, so I invited him. And I told him my friend needs 10 to 20,000 acres of land to cultivate oil palm, to produce palm oil. Does he know how to do that? He has big plantations. Can you take me to inspect them? Of course. Later on, when he came to Singapore, I used my helicopter, flying him and Tan Sri to the palm oil plantation in Krathong. It's next to Johor and Pahang.
So I went to the airport to wait for him. After he landed, I flew him with my helicopter to the palm oil mill in Segamat to do the inspection tour. After the tour, he came back to Sarawak, doing the policy planning. Then Sarawak started to develop the palm oil industry. That's how it began.
Palm oil industry development at Sabah and Sarawak in East Malaysia. After undertaking thorough inspection, Nam Hui decided to engage in two different patterns of cooperation with Malays and the local government. In 1997, Nam Hui and Sons Sendirian Berhad and Nam Hui Enterprise Sendirian Berhad bought palm oil plantations in Sabah through their subsidiary company Uniglobal Sendirian Berhad. Using the same plan to develop plantations, the yields got better and better every year and made huge profits for the companies.
$2,000 metric ton. That is for 2012. Our budget is 24,000, and we are expecting 26,878 metric ton or less. And this is what we are targeting for the remaining part of the year lah.
Sekarang kini sampai sini, kita start sini tahun 2005. Pasal datang sini bukan saran. Ulama yang susah, kita laut tolong. Banyak sahabat.
3-year-old oil palms. The yield of 1 acre field was 30% to 40% at most. For an acre field, 30% to 40% at most. The yield of 100 acres field was 3 to 4 tons. After 5 to 8 years, 7 to 8-year-old oil palms were better. They got a bigger harvest. In a good year, if the soil was fertile, we could harvest 7 to 8 tons. Applying extra fertilizers could harvest 10 tons.
Tan Sri is very kind to me. Every time he comes here, he encourages me gently, tells me to work hard. I say I would. His encouragement is very helpful.
Kerja dengan Mas Ranti memang puas hati. Ada macam happy lah. Bagus.
After we established Mazranti Estate, we went on to set up the Harnland Palita Estate. After that, we bought the land next to it. We developed it step by step. What he said to us has gradually become reality. At first, I thought, it's impossible. But in the end, he really helped us to set up plans and to fulfill them.
The future of the palm oil industry in Malaysia, in my opinion, is looking bright. Why? Because of the oil. For cooking oil, palm oil is the best. It has many uses. There are 2 grades of palm oil. Low-grade oil is used in soap making. Palm kernel oil is the ingredient of makeup, beauty products, and medicine.
Nam Hui is proud of himself that without even large capital to provide support, he can still open up forests to establish plantations and build Johor Tower. That's because Chinese know how to make the best of the right place, the right time, and the right people. And because of being a Malaysian Chinese, he has a business reputation and work ethic. Banking industry and his friends are willing to provide financial assistance, so Nam Hui could have a large amount of working capital.